This narrated PowerPoint presentation will cover the topic of verb voices, which is Chapter 8 from the Canadian Business English text. Specifically, the objectives of this PowerPoint presentation are to assist you in recognizing active and passive voice verbs, and also to change the passive voice verb into an active voice verb. First of all, let's look at active voice verbs. When a transitive verb expresses an action directed by the subject toward the object of the verb is in the active voice. So think about that for a moment. Hopefully you know the difference between subjects and objects by this point. So the subject is directing the action verb towards the object, and that's when we call the verb to be in active voice. Let's have a look at some examples. Consider the first sentence here. We now offer prepayment plans to all customers. As always, the important thing is to pick out the verb first, because that makes it easier to pick out the subject, and the verb in this case is the word offer. The subject in this sentence is we, and the object is plans. We offer plans. You can clearly see that the subject of we is performing the action of the action verb offer, making this sentence to have an active voice verb. The same for the second example. DataServe opened its operations to Nova Scotia. The verb is opened, the subject is DataServe, and the object is operations. So when we have a look, the subject, DataServe, is performing the action of opened. And let's have a look at the final example. The financial officer underestimated the operating expenses. The verb is underestimated, the subject is officer, and the object is expenses. The officer underestimated expenses. The subject in this case is clearly controlling the action verb, making this sentence to be active voice. Let's contrast the idea of the active voice with that of the passive voice. When the action of a transitive verb is directed toward the subject, the verb is in the passive voice. Consider this example. Our old audits will be revised. The verb here is will be revised, and the subject is audits. It appears that the verb is controlling the subject. The audits will be revised. The passive voice usually disguises or omits the doer or agent of action. So our question here is, who or what is revising the audits? And when you can ask that kind of a question, you'll always have a sentence that's in passive voice. The passive voice is often used when indirectness is desired. You're not giving any blame per se, and it's the doer that's omitted. For this reason, the passive voice is often referred to as the voice of tact. To illustrate the point further, let's look at a few more examples. In the first sentence, prepayment customer plans are offered. The verb is are offered, and the subject is plans. You can see that the plans are being acted upon, they are being offered, and the doer of this sentence is omitted. Who is offering the plans? Same thing for the next sentence. Operations in Nova Scotia will be expanded. Will be expanded is the verb, and operations is the subject. So operations will be expanded. The verb is acting upon the subject. And in the final case, current expenses have been underestimated. Have been underestimated is the verb, and expenses is the subject. And we can see that the subject is being acted upon by the verb, and we don't know who or what underestimated the expenses. So that's the missing part of the sentence that might make it into an active voice. Let's take some time now to check your skill. Identify the voice of the verb in the following sentence. The bank stopped payment on the check. The important thing to do is to determine what is the verb, and then to determine what is the subject, and then make a determination. Is the subject controlling the verb, or does the verb seem to be controlling the subject? The verb in this case is the word stopped, and the subject is bank. The bank stopped. This is an active voice. The bank is stopping the payment. Here we have another sentence. Emma spotted the accounting error. The first thing to do to determine whether we have an active voice verb or a passive voice verb is to determine what the verb and what the subject is. The verb in this case is the word spotted, and the subject is Emma. Emma spotted. This shows an active voice because the subject is acting upon the verb. Yet another example here. The accounts were left in a terrible mess. The first thing to do is to spot the verb, and the second thing is to spot the subject. Can you find them now? The verb in this case is were left, and the subject is accounts. The accounts were left. It seems that the verb in this case is controlling the subject of the sentence. Notice that we don't see the doer of this particular sentence. We don't know who or what left the accounts. This is the typical test that you might have to determine whether something is an inactive or a passive voice. The best way to change this sentence from a passive voice to an active voice is to put the doer as the subject of the sentence. So if John left the accounts in a terrible mess, we would say John as the subject, left as the action verb, and the accounts as the object. In this case, John left would be an active voice sentence. Let's have a look at one last example here. The sentence, the twins were taken to the nearest urgent care center. First thing to do, as always, pick out the verb and pick out the subject. The verb in this case is were taken, and the subject is twins. The twins were taken. The verb is presenting action on the subject instead of the subject taking action. This indicates to us that we have a passive voice. So how might we convert the sentence from the passive voice to the active voice, since the active voice is, generally speaking, preferred in business? Well, what you might notice is that the doer of this sentence is missing. Whom or what took the twins to the nearest urgent care center? So if the ambulance personnel took the twins to the nearest urgent care center, then what we could do is we could have the ambulance personnel as the subject, and we could change the verb to the word took, and then the twins would become the object of the sentence. The ambulance personnel took the twins to the nearest urgent care center. This changes the sentence from a passive voice into an active voice. I hope this PowerPoint presentation has been helpful to you, and good luck with the exercises and post-test for this unit.